Welcome to Genealogy Tea with the Lady of Archived History, where we live in the past and spill the tea on all things genealogy related. Welcome to another episode of Genealogy Tea. Today we are going to be discussing 10 types of records you may find in German genealogy research. The first type of record we are going to be discussing is a birth record. On these types of records, you may find the child's name, gender, date of birth, time of birth, where they were born, the father's information like his date of birth, age, residence, and occupation, and then the mother's information like her name, including her maiden name and her age. These records can be found in the civil registrations. To search the records, you will want to search the individual states' records, as Germany currently operates in the 16 individual states, and then prior to Germany becoming a country, all of the regions or individual states operated with their own records. The next record that we're going to be talking about is a death record. Information that will be provided on this is the deceased name, the date and time of death, location, their age, their place of birth, their residence, their marital status, and their occupation. These records can also be found in the civil registration of the individual states. Records sometimes give information on the person providing the report as well. So this could be sometimes, a spouse, a neighbor, whoever found it, and whoever is going to be reporting it to the city. Next, I want to talk a little bit about marriage records. On these records, you will find the following information on both the bride and the groom. You will find their names, their ages, their birth dates, where they were born, their residence, their occupations, their previous marital status, and sometimes you will find information on their parents as well. This is especially true if it is both the bride and groom's first marriage. These records can also be found at the civil registrations. Next, I want to talk about immigration records. On these records, you may find name, ages, who they are traveling with, like in a family or alone. A lot of these records can be found on FamilySearch.org and Ancestry. Some of these records are dating back to the early 1700s. There are some records available from Germany as well. However, some of those records have been destroyed, and so there could be gaps of research on that end, and that might be something that you encounter. Some common examples of immigration records that you might come across are passenger ship records or naturalization records. Next, I want to talk about the church records that you're going to come across. Church records are really vital in German genealogy because the churches have done a really, really good job of keeping track of a lot of vital records, and the church records go back way further than even some of the city records or state records or country records might. The first record we're going to be talking about is baptism. This information is typically going to be not on the date of birth of the child, but when they are actually baptized into the church. On this record, you might find the name of the child, the parents, name of the baptismal sponsors, we might refer to them as godparents. And then, like I said, you would have the actual date of the baptism, not the actual date of birth. Some baptism records do show date of birth as well. Next, I want to talk about marriage records that you will find throughout the church. On these records, you will find the date of the marriage, names of the bride and groom, and then the names of the father or that could be the father on both the groom's side or the bride's side if this is their first marriage as well. And then you'll also find information on their occupations and then where they resided. Next, I want to talk about burial information. Some of this information will include the name of the deceased, the date of the burial, the age or the approximate age of the deceased individual, and then it is important to point out, too, with the burial information that you are going to have the date of the burial. This could be different than the date of the death. A few other types of records you might come across in church records are confirmations, information on who's taking communion, family registers within the church, which is breaking down some of the family information of the people that are part of their parish. And then there is a miscellaneous category for church records as well. Church records can be found pretty easily online as well. You may want to start by searching the individual state, city, or parish where this person lived. German church records also exist in America. And then a lot of the church records, part of them will be handwritten. It can be kind of difficult to translate some of these, and they will be in German as well. So if you are unfamiliar with German handwriting and you don't speak German, I just want to remind people that some of the translation services like Google Translate, they're not super accurate when it comes to this type of thing, and it can be beneficial sometimes to seek the help of a professional genealogist. I know like at Archive History, we do have a native speaker who is able to translate these handwritten documents. The next type of record that I want to talk about are probate records. And this is something that we might refer to as a will as well. So some of these are not as common to find. They cover the settling of the property of the deceased individual. Some of that information may include real estate information, assets, or personal items that are meant to be handed out among family members. Some of these records can be accessed through the local courts or in the archives depending on where each state and jurisdiction is holding their records. So that is one that you may want to do a little bit of digging into. And like I said, they're not quite as common, so you may not have any luck there, but it's always nice to take a look because sometimes there is information in there that you wouldn't normally find in regards to someone passing away. So next I want to talk about census records. This includes U.S. and German census records. The U.S. census records can hold information relevant to research such as like a person's birthplace. So a lot of people who immigrated from Germany, their place of birth will be listed on the census. And the census records can easily be found online, including the 1950 census that just got released earlier this year, which I know is super exciting. And next I want to touch base on the German census records. They are not as common, though they do exist. The German census records prior to 1871 did not exist in such an organized fashion, though some states and regions did have their own systems for keeping track of the population and the information that would be on a census. Some information found on the German census may include birthplace, length of residency at that census location. And to access these records, you may need to do some research or reference the book German Census Records from 1816 to 1916, The When, Where, and How of a Valuable Genealogical Resource by Brigham Young. And I will put a link for that below in the description. Some collections are available only in book form, while some have been microfilmed and are available online. Next, I want to talk about newspaper records. Before the time of social media and even phones, newspapers have been notorious for being the go-to for finding out about what's happening around town. This is true for German genealogy as well. Both the United States and Germany have a large collection of German newspapers. Some of these newspapers can also be accessed online. It's important to point out that these records will most likely be in German and may need to be translated if you do not read German. Lastly, I want to talk about military records. Although German military records have some gaps due to records being destroyed, it is still possible to find some records on your ancestor. You can search some of the places online like the Myers Gazetteer, which can be found on Ancestry.com. Other records can be found on microfilm and books that the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints have created. I do encourage you to consider researching into German military records because there are quite a few resources out there that do have some records, even some dating back to the 1600s. Hopefully this list gives you a basic understanding of some of the records you may encounter when researching your German ancestor. One thing I hope that this list reflects is how beneficial it is to think outside of the box and get into a creative place when you're looking into records and searching high and low for records. The record treasure hunt does pay off from time to time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Genealogy Tea. I hope that you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe. Auf Wiedersehen.